First, let's take a look at our Kansas candidates running for state senate.
Greg Orman is running as an independent candidate against incumbent Senator Pat Roberts. Orman is a Princeton graduate and currently lives in Olathe, Kansas. Orman says he is running as an independent candidate because he is dissatisfied by both parties and wants to only answer to the people of Kansas. He has experience with both parties. During his time in college, he served on the George H.W. Bush campaign and supported President Obama in his 2008 presidential elections. Orman says his supports job creation, wants to work on immigration reform, and focus on education.
The Republican candidate for Senate, Senator Pat Roberts, is currently running for his third term in office. Roberts is a former Marine, graduated from Kansas State University, and currently resides in Dodge City, Kansas. Roberts supports risk-based agricultural programs and trades promotions activities through the U.S. education and wants to repeal the Affordable Care Act.
Jim Sherrill is a Democratic candidate from the 1st Congressional District. Sherrill was the mayor and city commissioner of Manhattan from 2007 to 2012. He earned a bachelor's degree from Wichita State University and followed that up with a PhD from the University of Colorado. Sherrill says that returning veterans deserve first-rate health care, including mental health care, as well as educational opportunities. Sherrill also wants to reduce the escalating long-term national debt.
Republican Congressman Tim Huelskamp was born and raised near Fowler, Kansas, and currently represents the Kansas 1st Congressional District in the 113th Congress. Huelskamp attended the University of Santa Fe, pursuing a degree in social science education, then went on to get his PhD from the American University in Washington, D.C. Huelskamp says he wants to repeal Obamacare and instead implement real patent-centered health care. Huelskamp would also like to create fair tax code that encourages job creation and productive investment.
We are now joined by Channel 8 News reporter Alyssa Lally to give us an insight into how the Kansas elections are being perceived in Washington. Alyssa?
Thanks, Morgan and John. We're joined here with Steve Chagaris from CBS News. Steve, really quickly, can you tell us a little bit about your background? How long have you been following this election?
In Washington for 20 years.
Sorry about that. You've said before that Democrats may have a problem being linked to Obama. Do you see that playing out here in Kansas? What do you think is the significance of that question?
Well, it's been a national issue for Senate candidates around the country, and if you look at any of the close races where Republicans are challenging Democratic-held seats, you're seeing that issue sort of play out in all those places. Kansas is an interesting situation in that you have an incumbent Republican who's in trouble, Senator Pat Roberts, running against an independent who hasn't been very clear about where he is going to stand if he gets elected, whether he's going to vote with the Republicans or the Democrats. So it's really been difficult to sort of nail down where Greg Orman, the independent, stands. However, Roberts, for his part, has been trying to tie Orman to Obama and the Democrats, and it's very clear that that's the strategy that the Roberts folks have taken.
So do you think that, because Greg Orman's had ties with both parties, do you think Kansas people know that, or do you think that's important to them, or do you think Pat Roberts is using it in his arsenal to kind of shut people down?
I think it's the latter. I mean, look at Kansas and Kansas's voting history. It's a very Republican state. Kansas voted for Mitt Romney by 22 points in 2012. It's not a place where anybody thinks that Democrats are going to have an easy time getting elected, although Democrats have been elected statewide in the recent past. It's still very difficult for Democrats to get elected, and so I think the Roberts folks are banking on that fact and are trying to tie Orman, say that his past as a Democrat, the fact that he's received money and support from some Democratic-tied organizations such as the AFL-CIO, and some of Orman's positions are to the left of where Roberts and the Republican Party are. I think they're banking on that to speak to Kansas voters and get them to vote for Roberts.
And one final question. What if we have a divided state? What if we have the independents and the Republican vote in the Senate?
Hearing you.
One last question. If the vote gets split, what can that look like in Washington?
If the vote is split, between if Orman wins,
Mm-hmm.
and what? Okay, so it could come down to Orman being the final, decision maker in terms of where he's going to, who he's going to caucus with, and so he said that he's going to caucus with the majority. Now, if it's up to Orman, he's going to be the guy that everybody's going to be talking to over the last 8 weeks and going into January. You're going to see a lot. He'll be probably the most influential guy in Washington, having not set foot in the Capitol yet, as he tries to figure out who he's going to caucus with.
Well, thank you so much for being with us, Steve. That's all we have today.
Thanks, Alexa. We're going to take a quick break.
Coming up, we will take a look at our governor's race in Kansas, as well as a live look discussion with the Capitol correspondent from the Associated Press in Oklahoma City. Stay with us.
Welcome back to the Channel 8 News Election Special.
First, we take it to Channel 8 News reporter Lindsay McNary, who is now joined by the Capitol correspondent for the Associated Press in Oklahoma City, Sean Murphy. Lindsay?
All right, thank you, Morgan and John. I'm joined now by Sean Murphy. Mr. Murphy, welcome to the show. You've been covering state politics and news around Oklahoma for at least the past 10 years. This year's been pretty intense governor's race going on. Can you give us an overview on how the election's been going?
Well, sure. Yeah, the interesting quirk about Oklahoma's election this year is that we have two U.S. seats on the ballot. That's separate. Both Senate, 4 of our 5 U.S. House seats also up for re-election. Republicans are heavily favored.
Okay. So Sean, education is a major issue in Kansas and Oklahoma. Why is education such a hot button issue? And what are the candidates doing, Fallon and Dorman, about funding education?
Okay. Dorman, Democratic challenger, is really targeting Republican incumbent Governor Mary Fallon for some of her policies in education. Obviously, education is important any election cycle. I mean, every legislator has schools in his district. Every parents of kids. It's always an important issue. And Republicans got in charge in Oklahoma and really pushed for some changes in education. They pushed for an A through F grading system for public schools that wasn't very popular. There's a number of things that have people concerned about public education in Oklahoma, and Dorman's trying to take advantage of that.
Okay. We also would like to take this time to apologize for the audio issues we were having previously. One last question for you, Sean. How tight is the race at this point in the campaign?
Pardon?
How tight is the race right now?
Well, there was a time when Dorman was closing that gap based on polls that I've seen. The most recent polling I've seen has Fallon, the incumbent, pretty well in command.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Mr. Murphy, for joining us today to give us a better insight into the political race in Oklahoma and in the Great Plains states. John, Morgan?
Thank you, Lindsay. Current Kansas Republican Governor Sam Brownback is running against Democratic candidate Paul Davis. Brownback is a journalism graduate of Kansas State University, where he served as student body president and member of Alpha Gamma Rho. Brownback was first elected to the U.S. House of Representatives in 1994. He represented Kansas's 2nd Congressional District. Brownback also served in the Senate until 2011, when he was elected governor. Brownback plans to keep the taxes low for small businesses. Brownback says he has conservative family values, opposes same-sex marriage, and is pro-life.
Democratic candidate Paul Davis is the son of 2 teachers and says that instilled middle-class Kansas values in him. He earned his undergraduate degree from the University of Kansas and went on to earn his law degree from Washburn University in Topeka. Davis says he has a strong commitment to public school, which he believes is vital for our prospects for job creation and economic growth moving forward. Davis believes that strong education ensures new and existing business to have an educated workforce that they need to grow and thrive.
Paul Davis and Sam Brownback recently faced off at a debate in Wichita. Here are some highlights from that debate.
Choice to make this fall, the direction for the state of Kansas in the future, and it's an important choice, and you have dramatic differences between myself and Paul Davis. I put forward a plan that's a conservative model. It's lower taxes, it's work requirements for welfare, it's getting our fiscal house in order, it's getting growth to take place, it's investing in our core functions like schools and roads. And we have done that, and we moved that agenda on forward. And now we're seeing things grow in the state of Kansas and record employment, 4.8% unemployment rates, and just yesterday, poverty index is going down in the state of Kansas according to the U.S. Census Bureau. We are moving in the right direction and getting things done.
I'm also the son of 2 teachers and the parent of a soon-to-be kindergartner. The issue of public education is personal to me. That's why I've been a steadfast champion for our public schools during my 12 years in the legislature. That's why I opposed Governor Brownback's largest cut to public school funding in state history. And that's why I will make restoring those cuts my very top priority as governor. It's one of the reasons why I have the support of over 180 current and former Republican elected officials, 3 speakers of the House, 3 Senate presidents, 3 lieutenant governors, a U.S. senator, and 2 Kansas Republican Party chairs. That's never happened in Kansas before, but it's happening because I have a track record of being able to unite Democrats and Republicans. It's also happening because the governor's economic experiment just isn't working, and it's not going to work.
Now, change is difficult, and this has been difficult. And we're moving now in the right direction, but Paul Davis represents an Obama model that seeks to have higher taxes, no work requirements, and to have more government intrusion into your lives.
Kansas just can't afford this. We have to go in a different direction, a direction that prioritizes our schools and uses proven ways to grow our economy, and that is exactly what I will do as governor.
We are now once again joined by Channel 8 News reporter Alyssa Lally.
Alyssa?
Thanks, John and Morgan. We've been talking about public education in Kansas, and to provide more insight into the subject, USD 383 school board member, we have Aaron Esterbrook. What have we seen in education throughout Sam Brownback's term as governor?
We've seen a lot of back and forth about what the state constitution means, and in the state constitution it talks about what the state's obligation to defining or creating an environment where quality education is mandatory. So the definition of what quality is, and then also the second part of that is for all students. So that funding has been in question, and there's been a debate, and there's been a Supreme Court case that kind of put the pressure on Governor Brownback's administration and the legislature to go through and pass finance reform for education, more spending for education, back to levels that were within the constitutional agreement there and definition. So that has happened, and there's interpretations of that being cut to education. A lot of people say under Brownback there has been the largest cuts to public education in our state history. On the other side of that, Governor Brownback's administration pushes back and say that they've actually invested quite a bit into education. On the local level, I would tend to agree that there has been quite a bit of cuts, and a lot of that investment has gone to retirement funds. It hasn't really reached the classroom. So that's kind of where we're at, and that's the issue between both of those candidates.
Well, thank you so much for being with us, Aaron. Back to you guys.
Thanks, Alyssa. When we come back, we'll talk with University of Nebraska student about raising the minimum wage.
We'll be right back.
Full ideas begin with you.
Welcome back. Welcome back to Channel 8 News Election Special. I'm Morgan Hulsman.
And I'm John Zettmeyer.
We are joined now with Kayla Van Wee from the University of Nebraska. There are elections going on all across the United States in the Great Plains. You have Oklahoma with a big governor's race. In Kansas, we have a big state and governor's race. And in Nebraska, the big issue is raising the minimum wage. Kayla, thank you for joining us today. In Nebraska, the big issue is raising the minimum wage. What is the controversy surrounding the issue? Who is for it and who's against it?
Initiative 425 is about raising the minimum wage to $9 by January of 2016. And most people for it are people earning minimum wage right now, our labor groups. People against it tend to be small business owners or big business, corporate, chamber of commerce. And the controversy with it, I mean, some people, they think that's going to be a good thing. I think students would think that would be a good thing. Earning more money and making more money per year, I think that would be a good thing for a lot of people. Some of the controversy for the other opposing side, they think that would for consumer inflation, they think that would sorry, I'm drawing a blank here. They think
Okay, and if raising the wage goes into effect, what does it mean to a college student to have those few extra dollars for every paycheck?
I think that for college students here in Nebraska, it was in 1997, our tuition for in-state students was about in the 2000s, didn't reach $3. Now that's about in the 8,000. So that's increased by almost 400%. So when we're, for the most part, working a minimum wage job, that can only, help in paying for that if, say, your parents aren't paying your bills.
Well, thank you very much for joining us today, Kayla. It'll be super interesting to see with the Initiative 425 what will pass. Thanks again.
Channel 8 News reporter Zaldi DeJungen is here in studio with Washburn Law professor and Kansas First News political analyst Dr. Bob Beatty. Zaldi?
Thanks, John Morgan. And Dr. Bob Beatty joins us now to discuss and provide an in-depth analysis on how the upcoming elections will affect Kansas and with what we can expect to go down at the polls. Dr. Beatty, thank you for joining us today.
Good to be here, Zaldi.
All right, so Dr. Beatty, if you can give a quick overview on what's been happening in the Senate and the governor's race.
Well, in the Kansas governor's race and in the Senate race, it's sort of ground zero for American politics. In the governor's race, really, what the voters have to decide is whether Kansas is a small c conservative state or an extremely conservative state. And we'll see Tuesday what the upshot of that is. In terms of the U.S. Senate, that's been the huge surprise. The Kansas voters have to decide whether Senator Pat Roberts has simply been in Washington too long, and independent Greg Orman is arguing that it's time for a fresh start for Kansas.
And these two races have gotten national attention because of how close they were, or they are. So we'll go with the governor's race first. If Governor Brownback doesn't win, what does that mean for Kansas?
Well, that's an excellent question. You know, Paul Davis, of course, is a Democrat, but the House and the Senate will most likely continue to be Republican. So in a long-standing Kansas tradition, Democrat Paul Davis would act as a check on the Republican legislature, and that's what a lot of people don't talk about, but he really wouldn't have a lot of power in the next 4 years. So again, you'd have that check and balance function of a Davis Democrat versus a Brownback as a Republican.
All right, and heading over to the Senate race, Pat Roberts has been here for over a decade now, and so here comes Greg Orman. And that race is pretty close as well. And so if Greg Orman takes Pat Roberts' spot, how big of an impact is that on the state of Kansas?
It's absolutely massive. We can't even imagine. I mean, it's an excellent question because we don't know what Greg Orman is going to do in the U.S. Senate. I think this has the potential, if Greg Orman wins, to sort of blow up Washington, inspire other independents across the United States to think about running for offices as independents. This is simply unprecedented. Think about this. The last time a non-Republican won a U.S. Senate seat in the state of Kansas, 1932.
Wow.
So it is big.
All right. Well, these two races will definitely be fun to watch. Thank you, Dr. Beatty, for joining us today. Back to you guys.
Thank you, Zaldi. When we return, we'll talk with a representative from Kansas State, from the K-State Republican and Democratic Party.
Stay tuned.
91.9.
Welcome back to Channel 8 News Election Special. I'm Morgan Hulsman.
And I'm John Zetmeyer. Our Channel 8 news reporter Willie Evans is now joined by representatives from the Kansas State University Republican and Democratic Party to give us two different outlooks on the campaign. Willie?
Thank you, John and Morgan. I'm joined now by K-State College Republican Organization member Laura Myers and K-State Democratic Organization member Kyle Neal. Welcome, both of you guys.
Thank you.
Now, the Senate race in Kansas is coming down to the wire. Republican candidate Pat Roberts is running against independent Greg Orman. Now, in September, Orman was endorsed by a group of about 70 former Republican officials. So, Laura, I want to ask you, why are so many people crossing the party line, and do you think they should be?
In regards to that question, I can tell you from Governor Brownback's campaign representative talked to me about that issue, and actually, those members were part of organizations that were nonpartisan, and those organizations that they were part of endorsed that candidate. So indirectly, they were endorsed, but not by personal choice, just by association with the organization is how that played out.
Back to you, Kyle. Same question. People seem to be crossing the aisle at least a little bit. Do you think that they should for Orman?
Absolutely, I do. I mean, the fact that 70 former members of the Kansas legislature have endorsed Greg Orman in his campaign against Senator Pat Roberts shows that Kansans really want change in how Washington is run. They see that Pat Roberts has been there for over 3 decades, and they see that there is a need for change and some new ideas and new positions to be brought in.
Now, Kyle, back to you again. Roberts has served in the Senate for almost 18 years. Why should Kansas vote for a candidate like Greg Orman, who really has never held a position?
Well, the benefit of bringing in somebody who hasn't held a position before is the fact that they are not necessarily beholden to special interests in Washington. Pat Roberts has served in Congress or in the Senate since 1981, and it's time that some new ideas are brought into the Senate. Pat Roberts has had his time, and what is really there to show for it? We have an outstanding current federal deficit and debt, and job creation is the #1 issue here, and Pat Roberts, at his current juncture, doesn't have a lot to show for it.
Laura, do you think that Kansans really need someone with a lot of experience like Roberts in office right now?
At this point, with the House and the Senate and the situation that it is, I think it's incredibly important to have an experienced representative. With a presidential election coming up, I think it's, too many new faces would be a sticky situation, and so I think having an experienced person.
Well, thank you very much, Laura. Thank you very much, Kyle.
Thank you.
John and Morgan, back to you guys.
Well, thank you. Experts say, and we also hope that the time Election Day rolls around November 4th, you can walk into the voting rooms confident. We thank you guys so much for joining us today, and hope that you guys got a deeper look from across the nation about the election going on.
And make sure if you can get out to the polls to get out there and vote. It's important.
For Channel 8 News, I'm Morgan Hulsman.
And I'm John Zetmeyer. Thanks for joining us.